Hey friends, Irene Lyon here. Welcome to this video, to this YouTube channel, and to this world of healing trauma, nervous system health, and all things neuroplasticity. One of the common questions I get, things I hear from my students, and of course you hear on social media, is what happens, or why is it that when someone gets excited, and by excited I mean joy, happiness, good times, that can turn into fear or terror or panic or anxiety. So I want to break that down today because it is a common thing, and one would think that joyful times, happy times, celebration, something that's really good and offers us just a lot of goodness, that it should come with a lot of goodness, a lot of wanting more of that, feeling settled, feeling calm, feeling connected. And for some people that might be the case. Now for others, if we have a trauma history, meaning we know that we were brought up and raised in an environment where the world was just this dangerous, scary, not safe place to be. Maybe we had a series of accidents, or maybe we were born premature, or maybe there was some kind of birth trauma where we were so wee and so little that all we could feel and sense was absolute the sense that something isn't right, that something is dangerous, and that the world is not to be trusted. So this is kind of a common theme that I hear and see when I'm working with either my clients in private practice, or when I was in private practice, or from my students online. They will say, yep, I was that person that never felt safe, that couldn't be who I wanted to be because I would be attacked, ridiculed, shut down. And it causes what we would call survival stress. So fight, flight, and freeze, these sort of basic elements of the autonomic nervous system. Part of our autonomic nervous system is there to protect us from danger, from harm's way. We use these survival strategies to protect ourselves, to either, of course, fight, flee, or shut down. Because we can't do the first two, we go into protection mode. So let's just say, hypothetically, that was how we were brought up. And our system, our physiology, our biochemistry, how our heart and blood pressure increases, it knows this quality of fighting and fleeing, and basically fighting for our lives. Again, let's just say that was our history. And let's just say that we got out of that situation. We grew up, we found safe environments, we were in safe relationships, and we hadn't yet, until of course now maybe, stumbled across the fact that maybe one of the reasons we struggle, that we have resistance, that we get sick, that we have, say, chronic ailments and illnesses, mental illness, etc., we've just stumbled across the fact that, oh my gosh, maybe this is because of these early, scary, stressful, somatic, traumatic experiences from my childhood. All right, so I'm just going to set that stage, that concept there. So let's just say that now we are out one day for a hike. I'm going to use exercise as a more kind of benign example. And we want to get fit, we want to get healthy. And so we're out, and maybe it's the first time in a long time, or maybe the first time ever, that our heart rate, because as soon as you start climbing up steps or a mountain, or you're on a treadmill, it doesn't have to be outside, you're on a stair climber, you're swimming, you're doing something where you're increasing your metabolic energy, you're using your big muscles, you're needing to get oxygen in and carbon dioxide out, so that you don't go into what we would call a lactate response, where there's that burning in the muscles. So the whole system goes into like high gear. It's like, if you think of a standard transmission, walking, sitting, it's like gear 1. We go a little faster, it's gear 2, 3, 4, and then when we really are driving fast on a highway, we drop it into the 5th gear, or sometimes the 6th gear, and it's just like whoom, fast, right? But that car is a machine, and it's progressively going up into 6th gear. Just like you couldn't go from sixth gear right into first gear, there needs to be this transition up, but also this transition down. Of course, it can happen quickly if the driver is nuanced in working the clutch and feeling the brake and letting off the gas. That's more of a driving lesson, but hopefully that analogy fits for what I'm about to say. So let's just say person who has a history of trauma and survival stress, they go and they start to physically exercise. And they're okay with walking. That feels fine, that feels safe. It keeps their heart rate in a zone that is comfortable for them. Then let's just say they decide to do a little more intensity. Maybe go up a few more steps, maybe increase it a little bit. And something in their system feels that increase, and it resembles the trauma response. It resembles the system's physiology saying, danger, danger, danger. I better get that sympathetic, adrenalized fight, flight going to protect, again, to fight or to flee. If you think about a person or an animal in the wild, when they fight and they flee, what's happening? The blood is going to the limbs. It's going away from the core so that we can run, so that our heart rate can go. The blood pressure spikes so that we can pump the blood to get oxygen to the cells, to the muscles, and get the carbon dioxide out so that we can go. So if we think of the individual who's starting to increase their heart rate, they're starting to do more activity, they're bringing more high intensity into that. If that is happening for, let's just say, the first time ever, and they've never felt their heart rate go up in that kind of a way with what we would call a neutral stimulus, it's an activation of the nervous system without a doubt, right? You're activating the heart, you're pushing blood to the muscles, you're needing more oxygen, you're needing to let out more CO2. It is an activation of the entire physiology and the nervous system. But if this kind of activation has never happened in a neutral, good for me kind of way, and the history, the wires have told you that when that goes to that level of intensity, it must mean that I'm going to die. It must mean that there is a tiger, that there is an attacker, that there is someone ridiculing me, and I'm going red in the face. I'm mortified. I'm trying to get out of here, but I can't. And so if that person who's wanting to do something good for themselves, which exercise is very important for our bodies, we need to work our heart and our muscles and our lungs and all of that. If they've never done this, it can be very, very easy for that individual to feel this intensity and think that what they're doing is wrong, and to be afraid of it and be in fear of this activation because it resembles the fight-flight response from when they were little. So now, of course, this is one example. It could be in a different situation. So what I will do, I'll finish off with the exercise piece. And I did another video on exercise. I'll post that below, just regarding the importance of exercise in healing trauma. But let's just say, hypothetically, this person knows that they want to do more activity. They want to increase their heart rate. They want to get stronger in their muscles and aerobic capacity. And they've dabbled with this feeling of, wow, like this resembles, I'm remembering my traumas as I try to do good for my body. At that point, that is your or the person's responsibility to say, this has nothing to do with that old trauma. This has to do with what we would call in the world, at least of somatic experiencing, a coupling response. So that fear from early on that was a true, real threat is almost being, it's like it's being Velcroed to the current moment with this activation of exercise, which is good for us. We have to tear that Velcro apart. We need to convince the body in some ways. We need to slowly work with the system in little doses. This is called titration. Again, I did a video on this a little while ago. I will post it below as well if you haven't seen that. We need to do increments of activity, slow enough, but also with intensity and recovery to teach the system, to teach the nervous system, to teach the heart, because it's not just the brain, it is the heart responding and saying, this isn't safe. We need to teach all of the physiology, our respiration, how our lungs are working, our gut, everything, to recognize that this is not dangerous, that this is good for us. And we've got to do it in a titrated, incremental way so that we are having a new experience with activation in the physiology, in the organism. And then we have to distinguish, and the key word here is differentiate. This is not what happened when I was 5, or when I was growing up in that household that was abusive, or at school being bullied, et cetera, et cetera. This is different. This is me taking care of myself, and I want to do that. And yes, it resembles that old stuff, but it's not the same. And this is where we have to not only work with our physiology and listen and be with it, we also have to work with our higher brain. We have to have a conversation with ourselves. We have to give ourselves a pep talk and be like, nope, this is exactly what I want to be doing. Yes, I'm feeling this response. It's old. And maybe you do back it down a little bit, but you do so in a way that's conscious, controlled, and still maintains connection to yourself, to the environment, to the world around you. And then you do it again. You do a little bit more intensity and you feel it, you monitor it. So for instance, if this is you, if you know that the reason you haven't been doing more intense activity is because when that heart rate goes up, you think you're going to die and you're going to go into a panic attack and you're going to want to fight and flee, but it's so intense that your system goes shut down. Because some people, again, if they've had this kind of early adversity, they will experience the activation. They will feel it as terror, as fear, as I got to get out of here. And quickly, again, if they're not careful, they can quickly go into shutdown. The blood pressure drops, the heart stops pumping. This is what the fainting response might be. So, all of this to say, exercise is important. We need to work our heart, our muscles, our body. And when we've had a history of early trauma and these experiences that hijack us and put us into these fear responses, again, fight, flight, freeze, shutdown, etc., we need to be cognizant and aware that that might happen and do it anyway. Of course, with safety and support and connection containment, we don't want to be reckless and just go and run up a hill to the point where we don't have the capacity. Because again, capacity needs to be built with fitness. We can't just be put on the top of Mount Everest and climb as if we knew how to do it all along on day 1 of an exercise routine. That would be impossible. The system wouldn't know what to do. So just like with healing the nervous system and working with the trauma responses and working with getting more internal with our physiology, we also have to incrementally dose out our activity, but push ourselves just enough to feel that spike in intensity, but to not become overwhelmed by it, to not go into a fear response, a survival response. And as I mentioned a second ago, that's where we have to keep our higher brain on board. If our higher brain stays on board and we're aware of everything that's happening, where we are, that means we're not going into the survival response. It means we're staying online in the present moment. Yes, we're experiencing a bit of activation, but that's not the bad thing. The bad thing is when the activation we feel gets coupled with more survival energy. I did another video, you've got your homework for you today. If you haven't seen a video I did a little while ago on the immobility response and being able to feel immobility without fear, it's a bit different from what I'm talking about today, but it's like the cousin to what I'm talking about today. So be sure to check that out. All right, so that was a big piece about why someone, just to review, might be feeling more fear and panic when they go to do something good for themselves, like higher intense exercise. Now, there's one more thing I want to talk about, and I mentioned at the very beginning of this. If someone is excited, they're feeling joy, they're partying, they're loving everything going on, and then all of a sudden they're feeling panic. It's like the system flips. it's fairly the same. It's pretty much the same around what I was just talking about. Again, you have the system that maybe if the history was that of a lot of scary stuff, a lot of fearful stuff, maybe we were in terror, it was just panic, anxiety, stress, survival, adrenaline, cortisol, all that growing up. Again, that brings our system into a heightened state of activation. So let's just say again, you're now an adult and there is no more bad stuff around us. We have a safe environment, we have good relationships, and we're celebrating someone's birthday or something like that, or a success that you've had. And again, there's all this activation, there's all this celebration, all the attention is maybe on you, there's dancing, etc., etc., etc. We can quickly, if we're not careful, and again, if we haven't done the work to heal those old traumas, we can get pushed into a survival response. And if that occurs, that doesn't mean that we're broken. It just means that the system isn't nuanced to be able to differentiate. This goes back to that Velcro I was talking about. The activation, the survival, the joy is coupled with the fear. And so the system goes, holy cow, activation, heart rate's up, blood pressure's up, breathing rate's up, I must be about to die. There must be a tiger chasing me. There must be someone who's about to attack me. But again, like I said in my exercise example, this is where we have to keep our higher brain thinking cap on while still staying connected to the somatic self. And it's interesting when we see children, and I am going to share a clip that was from a teaching environment I was in a long time ago. I don't like showing images and videos of infants and kids, but for the sake of teaching, I want to bring this in so you can see how joy and happiness with an infant can quickly turn to shock and terror. Now, I'm going to play the video at normal speed, and then at the end, I'm going to slow it down so that you can see what it looks like when a little one has got all this activation. And again, this isn't the fault of the parent, it's a misattunement. Parents want their kids to be happy. They want to have them be rambunctious and happy and full of joy. But when we think of an infant, and this is a fairly young infant, in that energy, they don't know how to titrate that activation. They need the adult, they need the parent, they need the caregiver to bring them back down, to bring them back to a bit of a pause, to a bit of a more moment of regulation. Otherwise, they're going to ramp up, they feel this activation, and then it mimics what we would call a survival response. So check it out. All right, so I hope you were able to see in that video, little one's having a great time, mom's having a great time. And then at the very end, there's this look of shock, terror, this look of this is too much. And of course, at that level, at that age, his or her brain can't say, Mom, I've had enough. It's the sound that you heard in the laugh. It got a little more terror. It had a little more terror in it, a little more intensity. There was a little bit of dysregulation. And again, if we're not nuanced in feeling our own physiology, we may not feel that in an infant, in that expression. So I wanted to show that to you as a teaching point, so that you can hear, that you can sense, and even if you turn off the volume and you go back and watch it again, you might be able to start to pick up on some of that intensity, that activation, that feeling of something's not right, and then at the very end, there's that boom, that shock. Okay, so I am going to bring this video to a close. Again, to go back to the original topic, it has to do with when we go into periods of joy, happiness, exhilaration, exercise that's more intense, activity that's more intense. For some of us who have a history of traumatic stress and lots of terror and activation and bad stuff that has occurred to us, we will be more wired, I should say, to not be able to differentiate between something that is a good activation versus something that is a scary and not good activation that requires more of a survival response. We want to be able to celebrate. We want to be able to feel intense joy, to exercise, to get our heart rate up, to be vigorous with our bodies, but without more of a survival response or fear response coming on board, which essentially puts us back into this sense of, I don't want to do that anymore. And if you imagine that, not wanting to exercise, that's not a good thing. And not wanting to celebrate and have success is one way that we sabotage ourselves, right? If we know when we feel goodness and happiness and joy that we're just going to feel absolute panic and terror, then we're not going to put ourselves into situations that allow us to get to those points of celebration and goodness. I hope that makes sense. All right, thank you so much for being here and watching this and learning. Again, I've mentioned a few other videos below. If you're watching this on YouTube, they're in the Show More section. If you're on Facebook by any chance watching this, they might be in the links near this video. If you haven't yet subscribed to this YouTube channel, please do so. That'll make sure that you get notified when my videos come out each and every week, and we're doing a few more than just one a week these days, so be sure to subscribe, and we will see you next time.